Has anyone heard the term neurodiversity before or knows what it means? Cool, we got a couple, wonderful. So there's I'm gonna start with a bunch of context for you guys because it is sort of a newer phrase and a topic that is pretty undeveloped or like not widely spoken about in the world, especially in sort of like diversity and inclusion and accessibility conversations, particularly like in our industry that we're having with. So we're gonna start with a little video. I might not play all of it, but Now This, which is like a very popular Facebook video or kind of social media thing outlet, put out this video maybe about a year ago, and it was actually what inspired us to start formally speaking about this stuff.
Neurological differences like autism or ADHD are considered to be dysfunctional disorders and disabilities under the medical model of mental health. There's too little attention given to enabling people with neurologically different minds to be accepted for themselves, to discover and celebrate their strengths, and to find a place in society that values their differences. When most of us think of diversity, we think of things like race or sexual orientation, but there's a different kind of diversity you might not know about: neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is the concept that neurological differences among people should be recognized and respected. I believe it's time for this new social movement, the neurodiversity movement, to take off. Neurodiversity is a part of our genetics and of our evolution as a species. The genes for autism and ADHD are not errors, but rather are the result of variations in the human genome that have and will continue to have advantages for society. One of the genes associated with ADHD, the DRD4 gene, is known as the novelty-seeking gene. It arrived on the human evolutionary scene over 10,000 years ago. Genes associated with autism also go back more than 10,000 years. Research suggests that genetic variants linked to autism might have been positively selected during human evolution because they contributed to exceptional memory skills, heightened perception in vision, taste, and smell, a precise eye for detail, and an enhanced understanding of systems such as animal behavior. These characteristics likely remain in the gene pool today because they are still advantageous. As a psychologist advising the parents of differently wired kids, I tell parents they have a choice between trying to change the child to fit the environment and changing the environment to fit the child. There are many different microhabitats and subcultures in our world. For an individual with autism or ADHD, finding success on their own terms may come from discovering the particular niche that fits best, the niche that allows their strengths to shine and their challenges to be minimized. Individuals with ADHD tend to thrive in situations of rapid change, variety, and that reward creativity and out-of-the-box thinking. A career as a comedian, detective, entrepreneur, journalist, actor, EMT technician, or photographer could be. I'm not saying that having autism or ADHD is easy. And I don't mean to downplay the real suffering that can be caused by having a neurodevelopmental condition, disability, or difference. But it's also time the world sees the beauty and value in brain differences. Neurodiversity might be every bit as crucial for the human race as biodiversity is for life in general. My vision is for a neurodiversity tolerant and accepting society where differences are celebrated for the depth and dimension they bring to the human condition. I want children whose brains are wired differently to be encouraged to find their niche instead of changing to fit other people's ideas of normal. Diversity in every sense makes our world a better place, and people who think differently are a huge part of that.
Super inspiring. I've had to watch it a lot to not like tear up at it. It's super great. Yeah, so the idea is essentially that like the differences in cognition that are displayed throughout the human species are actually there for a reason. They are not there. Hi guys. They're not there by accident. They are not they are not a disability. It does not necessarily affect your ability to have success in the world, but they are things that our society is not built around, right? So think about like our society accommodates a lot of people who are of different sexual preferences, right? Like we sort of built a society to tolerate those types of differences, and we haven't yet built a society that tolerates neurodiversity, and it can be really prevalent in schools, particularly schools, also at work, in many social scenarios. Also, in my notes here, I have a little thing. There's a great article that I can send around that's not referenced here about anti-vaxxers and how that phenomenon sort of came about because wealthy upper-class parents were scared of their kids having autism, which there was some faulty science that said vaccinations can give your kids autism, which is not true. And so that is sort of like a very intolerant way that says we won't vaccinate our children, right? We'd rather have them get horrible diseases than have something like autism. Some quick statistics, everyone loves stats. So about 20% of kids are dyslexic in the world. 90% of people on the autism spectrum are estimated to be underemployed or unemployed, which I think is a big statistic. So people who maybe were very high succeeding in colleges who have autism don't actually find a job that meets their training out in the world. So this is sort of why I'm giving these talks. I want to put the neurotype, which is meaning like where you fall on the neurodiversity scale, into discussions about diversity and inclusion. Specifically in the technology industry that I work in today, it's really not discussed. You know, I think race and gender are probably the most discussed, which makes perfect sense. They're easy to see. Our country particularly has had some really awful issues with these things. It makes perfect sense to me that those are sort of the bigger first things we should tackle. But neurotype is just not even included at all yet, and so that to me is sad. Also, it's not widely spoken about, particularly in interaction and product design, as a part of accessibility. Right now, I think if you go to a talk or look up web accessibility online, it's going to tell you about how to make sure your color choices are great for colorblind people and like how you should write your HTML so you can tab around effectively if people are using screen readers. And it's not going to talk at all about people with dyslexia or dysgraphia or autism or ADHD, and that to me is really sad. Here is just a semi-long list of disorders that sort of fall into this scale. Everything from like an auditory processing disorder, which is one of the ones that is least diagnosed in the United States, meaning the sounds that you take into your brain get sort of jumbled up and processed differently, all the way to things like visual motor defect disorders, which is like you might have a hard time catching a ball. So basketball's probably not your thing. I personally suffer from two of the things on this list. I have dysgraphia and I have dyslexia. Probably most of you have heard of dyslexia before. It's pretty common. And I'm going to go way in depth on that specific topic in my next set of slides. So dysgraphia is another thing that I suffer from, which is a motor disability that has to do with how my brain processes thoughts into physical communication. So it basically affects your handwriting. Oh no, you're fine. Oh my gosh. It affects your handwriting, and so it basically stints your ability to have nice handwriting forever, as much as you want to practice, which makes whiteboarding in front of clients very scary for me. So I want to get more specific. Usually in the talk, me and my coworker Debbie go through several neuro differences and get really in depth in them. Since she's not here, I'm just going to go over one and try to build as much empathy as I can with you guys while I have you as a captive audience. And we're going to talk about dyslexia specifically. It is something that I suffer from. It's something I know a lot about. So I want to talk about that. So dyslexia, this is sort of the best definition that I found for it, affects people's ability to work with words, numbers, and symbols. This leaves them at a disadvantage in the world of written word, right? So that means anything that is printed on a page that then your brain has to see and translate into a piece of information can get lost. Specifically, the people with dyslexia have the most challenges, or the most reported challenges with translating those symbols into sounds into your head. So just some basic things. It's a lifelong brain-based issue, right? So you can't get surgery to fix this. That's not a thing. You can't take medication, won't fix it. It's not like ADHD in that way. The most common issue found in people with dyslexia is translating individual symbols to sounds, right? So if you see the letter A, making the ah sound, that is usually what people have a hard time distinguishing from. A common thing like with kids when they're learning to read who have dyslexia, we'll say like, oh, A, E, and U all sound the same in my head to me, right? Like I just can't, I can hear the difference when we're speaking, but when I see them, my brain doesn't get there. And dyslexia can affect much more than spelling, reading, and writing. So it can also affect your ability to do math, right? So like if you think of like a long division problem that's really long, and you have to see a lot of symbols that line up with each other and have effect onto each other, it can be very hard for your brain to process those symbols into the information that they are. Some fake news about dyslexia that everyone talks about all the time. It does not just make letters move around on a page. I think this is like the most common thing when you talk about dyslexia is like, oh, does it just look like a motion graphic of things moving around? And there's like some really beautiful YouTube videos of like graphic design students with dyslexia who make these like really beautiful collages of letters moving around, which are cool, but that's not actually like a scientific symptom of the disorder. It is just sort of a really good metaphor to describing sort of the confusion that you can have when you look at a big page of words or a big block of text. So like fonts have a really interesting sort of history in the world of dyslexia, and I'm going to get into it a little bit more later. But you can't just like design a font to get rid of dyslexia, right? So it has to do with how your brain sees a symbol and interprets a sound, right? It doesn't have anything to do with your brain not being able to recognize what a symbol is as something, right? So people with dyslexia can see the letter Q and understand, like they can say, that's the letter Q. I know what that means. What these fonts do actually, what you can solve is like very legible fonts. So there have been studies of these dyslexic friendly fonts that are like very heavy at the bottom and have very long ascenders. That it's much easier for people to read them. They can read faster when they see them, but it has nothing to do with accuracy, right? It doesn't increase or decrease the amount of dyslexia that you have. So dyslexia is a visual-based issue, or is not a vision-based issue, right? You can't get glasses to fix it. You can't make letters really big, like the size of things doesn't affect your ability. You can't get surgery on your eyes. It is a brain-based issue, not a vision-based issue. And dyslexia can't be cured, which I think I've covered pretty great. It often sort of gets better over time. Like people learn strategies to make it seem like they're not as dyslexic as they actually are. So people can blend in very well after years and years of having to sort of live within our communication society that we've built. But it cannot be cured. It does not go away. There's a lot of talk on the internet, and if you like search Amazon for books about dyslexia, there's going to be a lot of things about the dyslexic advantage, which is sort of spinning. Again, I think it like sells to parents who are freaked out that their kids are going to become like homeless people because they have trouble reading. It's the idea is that like people with dyslexia have certain advantages over people who don't have dyslexia, and they have like these amazing, powerful, creative minds that you could never ever achieve unless you had this thing. I think it's pretty condescending to talk about disorder in this way. I'm not sure we would ever say like people in wheelchairs have magical abilities that no one else has in the world. I think it's an interesting spin to put on something, and I think it degrades the actual like suffering that these people can really go through. People with dyslexia have a really high percentage of depression. Kids with dyslexia in high school are 50% more likely to kill themselves or attempt to kill themselves before high school is over. So I think spinning this, it's an interesting spin, but I think it's just that. It's just a spin on some data. Fonts, we went over this. So you can look them up. There's one called Open Dyslexia that's really popular. It's like an open source project you could download on your computer. The guys, there's like every couple of years, Fast Company will write an article that's like, dyslexia is over, and this student made this font, and it totally fixes it, and it's super upsetting. And every time I send it around with like horrible, all sorts of stuff. There is a bunch of technology that people are coming up with to try to help people with dyslexia, which is super interesting to me. So there's like predictive text, like on every keyboard on your iPhone, speech to text, which I use all the time. There's spell check, which is getting better and better by the day. There's like those speed reading programs. Have you guys seen those where it just shows you one letter or one word, at a time, and they just like flash in your face, and you can read a lot faster than you can, and you can like upload whole books, like whole PDFs into it. It's really fun. You can read like twice as fast. And text to speech, right? So you can have things read back to you. Like when someone sends me a really long text message, I often have like my phone read it back to me because it would just take me so much longer. So action. So this is sort of the part of the talk that I think might be most interesting for us to like, I can open it up, we can have some more questions now that I feel like we all have a good baseline for what neurodiversity is, and particularly like one symptom or one type of disorder you can have. And so if you guys have questions at this point, like please start asking and we can have more of a lively discussion. The talk is not much longer, so we can totally keep it going. It's pretty brief. So these are sort of the design principles that I've come up with that I think help you organize. You can like organize your designs around to help people with all sorts of neurodiverse abilities. So I think engagement is really important. So I have help me when you need it, not when I don't, right? So Google spell check, or like Google Doc spell check word does this. This interaction's been around for a really long time, but when you spell a word wrong, it just has that little red line underneath it. What it doesn't do is like give you a little green line every time you spelled something perfectly. And so that I think would be the opposite of engagement. It engages you when it notices that you need some help, and it allows you to get that help. So personalization, this is sort of more of a larger span of features that you can find in many things. I have Slack themes as my example, but a lot of like web products, particularly right now, are coming out with different themes that you can customize. YouTube came out with like a dark theme maybe like 6 months ago, and they did this like huge marketing push around it. Even though you think it's not that exciting, things are just like from primarily white to primarily black, or like in the new macOS update, you can flip from dark to light too. I think these are really great. It gives you the power to make things less distracting for you. You can focus more. In Slack, you can get rid of like the little pictures that always show up when you send a message like to someone, so it's just text. You can also like design your own Slack theme. You can like put in hex codes. If you guys didn't know that, it's really fun. Should totally do it. The other thing is simplistic, and actually since I made this presentation, Spotify just updated their app, and it is even simpler than the little player that I have displayed here. But eliminating features that you don't need and keeping things very sort of like top level, I think is really impressive. So like Spotify doesn't have any space in its UI to adjust your volume, right? Because like all of our phones have these little volume knobs on them. And so they've just eliminated that ability completely. And they actually got rid of it about a year and a half ago. There used to be a menu you could open up and adjust the volume, and now it's just impossible. And now their screen, like in the new one, they've gotten rid of like, there's this little repeat arrow, like this is hidden, I think the shuffle's hidden, and the heart is hidden. Like they've really like reduced it down even more to a more distilled interface. Okay, so there's also sort of 3 techniques that I think are really important that span sort of the whole interaction design gamut of skills you can have that I think, and I've sort of distilled them down to, there's one thing you can do to affect something at a business level to help people with, who are neurodiverse. There's one thing to help like specific users, so like one-off people who are moving through your site, and at sort of like a user research level. And then at more of like an UI design or more of a craft level, I think at the interactions level, and I have examples of all these things, there's a lot of power to be had there. So who here has used or heard of a value proposition before? Are you guys doing something with this right now? Fun, they're great. And I would say like, it is probably one of the hardest things for businesses to like regurgitate back out to like stakeholders, particularly like the older the business, the more people who have worked there over time, maybe leadership has changed, value propositions get like diluted down really fast. And I think especially with like, I think if you think of like Facebook, they started with a very like direct mission to help connect like college students, and they've expanded out, and now they have like Facebook Watch, and there's like a marketplace on there, and I have like really no idea what that has anything to do with their original value proposition. Anyway, so starting businesses to solve the problems that neurodiverse people are having is obviously like a really great way to help them. And I think is a design tool that can be used very effectively to like iterate at a very high level. I've had a lot of clients that I've used a value proposition or a lean canvas or a business model canvas with to sort of ideate through their ideas. Sort of my clients who have been newer companies. Here's where I mentioned understood.org. It's great. So this is a company that clearly has this mission at the very heart of their whole platform, right? They are solving a problem for these people directly. But I think even more abstractly, we can look at companies who maybe don't have as direct of a mission. Another great one is Grammarly. Has anyone used this? I use their keyboard on my phone all the time. It's really good. You should all download it. So they're just trying to help people communicate more effectively is sort of their mission, but it has a direct effect specifically on people with dyslexia or other communication-based disorders, where they have really helped people on all platforms solve for this communication issue, right? So they have a web plugin. They're in Google Docs now. They have an iPhone keyboard you can use, and I can only imagine it's going to continue more and more and more. And it's super accurate, I've found. I think even more abstractly, something like Giphy, which is another like huge, I think they're like valued at over $1 billion right now. Company that is revolutionizing how we communicate with each other, right? I think like we've probably all sent GIFs a ton. We see them on Instagram all the time. They're very popular. They I think have revolutionized people's abilities to like translate their thoughts into actions very quickly. And I don't have to type out a message to my friends anymore. I can just send them a GIF and they know exactly what I'm talking about. And that helps me as a person with a disability a lot. So there's this great company called Strategizer, which is at the bottom of this little document, and they have what's called a value proposition canvas, which they launched pretty recently. And I've never used it in practice. I've sort of printed a couple out and filled them out just for fun. But I think this can be a great tool that you can bring into your professional work, even if you're designing, maybe like you're at a bigger company, you're designing a smaller feature set. I think you can ideate on solutions using something at a very high level and understand sort of like what your customers' jobs are, their pains and gains, what products and services you can build to help them, or maybe if you're at a larger company, sort of like what features you can build to help them, pain relievers. So this is a really fun graphic that you can fill out that I totally recommend you guys trying out. Another one is the lean canvas. Has anyone here made a lean canvas before or heard of it? I am always shocked by how many people have not heard of the lean canvas before. It is like my favorite thing. So it's really similar to a business model canvas. Has anyone used those before? Yeah, those are helpful. This was sort of developed after the business model canvas to help startups understand what their business was faster than a business model canvas. And it has some key differences that I won't go super in depth into, but I think a couple that are really important are your customer segments, so like all the different types of people who might use your platform, your unfair advantage as a company. A lot of startups that I've used this with always say their founder is sort of the unfair advantage, which I think is not great in case they ever decide to step down. You should probably actually know what your unfair advantage is and how you might actually beat your competition. Then it has things like problems and solutions. This is really great, especially to like reverse engineer something on. So like if you filled one of these out for a company you're maybe thinking about working for, it could be very interesting if you can figure out that, or maybe for your guys' thesis projects, if you tried to map this on there, I'm sure it would be really interesting, and you could maybe find some weaker spots in those. To move on to sort of the user-centric or like user research part of things, who's here has used a behavior archetype? I'm not sure if it's really called that anymore. That's what I learned it as when I was in school. So they're really close to personas, but instead of being as prescriptive, all they talk about is a behavior, and a persona can have multiple behavior archetypes, right? So I have a little example here. So you can see this example is breaking it down to the professor, the maverick. I think this was an example from BuzzFeed, I believe, the BuzzFeed design team. So is the professor, the maverick, the socialist, the collaborator, and they have these larger buckets like media, marketing, leadership, and you can see in leadership there's 2 behaviors that they found like leadership has, or in marketing there's 2 types of behaviors that different personas could fall into. I've done a project for a grocery shopping startup where I found like people had very specific ways of shopping. There were sort of like 3 things, and users had like a very interesting intermingling of those 3 priorities, right? So it was sort of like around convenience, quality, and price for shopping for groceries. And some people would like walk 1,000 miles to get the highest quality thing, and like some people would spend all the money in the world, but they would get the lowest quality thing, and they were all equally as happy. So I think thinking about behavior specifically, especially with neurodiversity, can be really helpful because you can find how different ability types might fit into your behaviors, right? So if you have someone, I don't know if you guys have learned anything about game design, they're sort of like the masters of behavioral archetypes. But if in a game, you might have someone who really cares about like winning, and you might have someone who's really excited to like cheat, and that's what makes the game fun for them. And finding like what types of disorders in the world can map to those 2 different types of behaviors can be really powerful. So to go back to Grammarly as an example, someone with dyslexia might really love Grammarly because it helps them communicate really well. And maybe that's their behavior, right, is they want to communicate better. There might be another behavior that someone is really anal and they want to be perfect, right? And that's a different behavior that maybe someone with dyslexia can also fit into. So interactions, this is sort of like getting right down into the details of things. I think the patterns and interactions we choose have the ability to make things more compelling or more frustrating for people with who are neurodiverse. I think choosing interactions that appeal to a wider audience can help enhance your value proposition as a company and help make your products more accessible and more inclusive to a wider audience. So some examples is, this is a company called Millinote, and this is how you comment on something. They're like an online like mood boarding tool. So if you saw that, I can play it again. Right, so in the tool, you actually drag somebody's face onto a card, and then you can type, and it's a comment directed to them, which is super interesting. So it feels more like you're talking with them, and it's very easy for you or to see who you're talking to, right? So if someone who has a hard time with names, like I do, like right now on my project I'm working on, I have 2 stakeholders named Christina and Catherine, and the amount of times I like tag the wrong one on Slack is crazy. I wish I could just like pick their face all the time. That would be super helpful. The other one is, has anyone used Asana's timeline tool that came out? They have a really, not yet. They have a really fun interaction where these tabs and that feel very tactile grow when you hover over, and you can sort of like expand and detract things and move them around. Let me play this again. All right, so you can see you hover over it, it comes out, you move it, then there's color and a line that also sort of interact with those shapes, so you really know what's going on. You can really tell that your action affected one person to block another person in this case. So that is all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for listening. I think we have plenty of time.